Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. Soil testing is important. Today we're going to find out if do-it-yourself kits are worth the effort. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Peter Richards. Peter is our local gardener. Hi, Peter.
Hey.
So we're going to talk about soil testing.
Yeah.
Soil testing is very important because we always say, why guess?
Soil test.
All right, so we actually did some soil testing. What do we have on the table here?
Yeah, so what we have here is we have 5 different soil test kits.
Okay.
Now, soil testing is really, really important because that lets you know what is in your soil, and your soil is where your plants get all of their nutrients.
Yeah.
And so it lets you know if you are deficient in this particular nutrient, then you need to add some more.
Yeah.
So before you fertilize, if you have a soil test, you know exactly how much fertilizer to put down in order to make that soil perfect for your plants to grow.
Yeah.
I've always been curious about some of these home test kit soil tests that you can do. So I compared them.
All right.
So
That's neat. Yeah.
the most reliable soil tests you can get are lab-based soil tests.
Yes.
So you take the soil, you send it away to a lab, they analyze it with professional equipment. They do this all day, every day.
Yes, they do.
They know what they're doing, their equipment's calibrated, all that stuff, so you get accurate results.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is one kind of soil test, and I'd say that's the gold standard.
Right.
So we sent some soil to UT Soil Labs, and they gave us results. Okay. We also have a couple of other soil test kits that I compared to them. So the first one here is a soil probe. Okay, so this probe it's a 4-in-1 probe. And there are many like it. In fact, that's the case for all of these. There's many like it. I chose one of each kind of soil test. So this one will test brightness of the light. It'll test soil moisture, it'll test pH, and it'll also test fertility, which I'm not exactly sure what that is. But it's pretty simple. You take it, you stick it in the soil, you wait a couple minutes, and you read
Convenient.
what it says. Yes,
Like
so very easy to use.
Yeah.
The next kind, and once again, there's many tests that you can buy that are like these, and these are representative samples of each major kind that you can get. So then we have, I'm going to call this the capsule test. So what you do here is you put your sample in the container, and then you get a capsule that contains something. You break it open and put it in with the test, and it turns a color, and you read it on the little strip right here.
Okay.
Okay. The next kind here, we're going to call it the drip test, okay, because it uses drips of chemical. So for this one and for the next one I'm going to talk about, it requires that you put some soil in with water, let the soil settle out, and then take some of the water off of it in order to test the water. Now, I have a problem, and that is that I have a lot of clay in my soil. Okay, so this is some soil that I put in water, and that was 3 weeks. That's 3 weeks of separation. So you can still see that there's a lot of color here.
Yeah, that's crazy, yeah.
But once again, you take this, you separate it out, put in a couple drops of chemical, read against a color chart, and it tells you the value.
Okay.
This last part uses pills. So instead of drops, it uses these pills. So you pop them out of the containers and put them in and do the procedure that it says. The interesting thing about this is that one of the pills that they give you, you drop it in with some soil and water in this container, and it separates incredibly rapidly. So in 30 seconds, you have usable clear water.
Wow.
So it's even clearer than this. You know, it's perfectly clear water, and then you can use that to do tests with. These are the 3 major kinds of soil tests you can find online for home kits.
Right.
And so the brand doesn't matter,
Okay.
because there's many options from many different brands for each of these.
Okay.
So they're all pretty They're all pretty straightforward. There's a little bit of a learning curve on it. Now that I've done it once, it would be much easier for me to do it again.
Okay.
Let's talk about what I did.
All right.
Because that's kind of important. So what I did was I went into my yard and I got 14 samples.
14. That's a lot.
And so they were taken from the surface down to about 6 inches deep.
Very
so
important.
we get a good core of what's going
And you were
on.
consistent in that, right?
Yes.
It makes a difference. Okay.
Yep. Then I took it and I put it out on a cookie sheet and dried it at room temperature. At that point, if you were just sending it to a soil lab or doing tests, that's good enough.
Yeah.
Okay. But because I had to have accurate results across 5 tests that compared to each other, I went ahead and took the soil and I smashed it with a hammer and got it down to a powder. And the reason I did this is because now I can mix it together and so that it is uniform and everybody gets the same test.
Yeah, it looks like hot cocoa mix or something
Yeah,
like that.
nope,
right?
it does. I joked with that with my kids. So then from that, I took and I put some in the box and sent it off to UT Labs. And then I also did the experiments as exactly as it was said in the instructions for each of these kits.
Got it.
I used distilled water. And so all of the equipment was triple rinsed in distilled water between uses or before the first use.
That's good.
Because I'm trying to get this as exact as possible. I used distilled water instead of tap water because my tap water probably has chemicals in it and nutrients that are going to affect my results,
it would.
and I don't want to do that. So I followed the instructions exactly on all these kits with one exception, and that is in how long I let the soil settle out of the water.
Okay.
It recommended 30 minutes to 24 hours. After 24 hours, my water was still brown. And being that this is a color test, that's going to really affect it.
Right.
So I let it settle for a week, and then I think it was usable. Also, I did not look at the UT soil test results until after I had done all the tests at home. That way I wouldn't be biased. I was blind in that. And the other thing to note is I did not test nitrogen. I did not test nitrogen because nitrogen is incredibly transient in the soil. It only lasts a few weeks. And so even if you are testing nitrogen in a lab soil test kit, you have put your soil in there, you send it off, they test the nitrogen. By the time you get the results back, the nitrogen in your soil is different. So it's really not useful to test.
Right, which is why you don't see it on your test results.
Exactly. Let's talk about results.
Oh, that's what I want to hear.
That's what we want to know
All right,
here.
let me get ready. Okay.
So, pH.
Okay.
It is probably the single most important thing.
Yes.
And so, the soil lab said that the soil has a pH of 6.
Okay.
Okay. So the soil probe, I stuck it in the soil, and I did it 3 times. Now, it gave me a soil reading of anywhere between 5.6 and 6.2. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's in the range. It's a workable amount.
Yeah, that's good.
The problem with the soil test probe is that you need to make sure you read it at the correct time, as the pH is slowly moving the entire time. So if you stick it in and come back in 15 minutes, you're going to get the wrong reading. So that's kind of interesting, but it was pretty easy. And it was pretty accurate, as we see.
Yeah.
Okay?
And we should say pH of 6 is not bad.
No,
Not bad at all.
that's good.
Okay.
Yep. So now let's go over here to the capsule test. So this was, you put a little dirt in, put some water in. It was very difficult because I have such clay soil to be able to see what the accurate color is. Because if you notice, the soil is about the same color as some of my readings. So it made it really hard. But my best guess was it was about 6.2. So a little high, but we're really close still.
In the neighborhood.
Yeah. Okay, so now, same thing with the drops. You're comparing against color charts. So it's kind of hard to be accurate since you do have a little bit of tint in the water. But it came in as somewhere between 6 and 7. So it gave me a color for 6 and a color for 7. I had to guess in between the two. So
That one, okay.
yeah. Now the pills, I put it in, and that is actually, you take a test strip and you look at it on a test strip and compare it to the colors. I got a pH of 5.5, and it was a dead ringer on the color, but that was fairly low. So some of these work, Some of them don't work as well.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a crapshoot. I was very impressed with the probe though, because the ease, I could take it out, I could stick it in my ground out in my garden and get a reading. I don't even have to dig any dirt.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Yeah.
And get the results a lot faster.
Get the results really fast. Once again, it's a range,
It's a range. Yeah.
but it was pretty close.
Okay.
So now, let's talk about phosphorus and potassium.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this goes into what you would call in chemistry quantitative analysis. So how much of something exists. It's easy to know if something exists or not, but to know how much requires some really specific parameters. And these are, once again, are all color-based. So how close is your color to what the sample is in order to tell what it is. A lot of these are highly dependent on time. So it says, take this, put it in here, wait exactly 10 minutes and take the reading.
All right.
And on some of these, the color was moving the whole time. At 10 minutes, I took the reading and the color continued to move
Wow,
afterwards.
so you could see that. How
Yeah.
about that?
So it's, you know, that time is really, really important and can kind of skew your answers a little bit.
Right.
So let's talk
Did
about.
you take it right at the 10-minute?
I took it right as it said, right at 10
Right
minutes.
at the 10-minute mark.
Yep.
Okay.
So let's look at phosphorus here.
Okay.
So the soil lab said that it gave me 49 as my number. That is pounds per acre.
Okay.
I converted that to parts per million so that I could compare to the rest of them. So that compares out to 24.5 parts per million of phosphorus in my soil. A soil probe does not test phosphorus or potassium. It only tests pH. So that's out.
That's out. Okay.
So capsules here. So the phosphorus test, once again, you have to read the colors, and it doesn't give me a value. So it only gives me depleted, deficient, adequate, sufficient, surplus. That's all it gives, and there's no equivalent to what it is. It said I was deficient, whereas the soil lab test said I was high.
Okay.
So that is very wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. Soil test drops. It said, once again, it was colors. I had to guess. My best guess is it said there was 120 milligrams per liter. Now, I had to convert that to parts per million to make it work. Yeah. That is a very dicey calculation to make because it all depends on how heavy your soil is, as in weight heavy.
Yeah.
And so my best guess is that comes out to about 74 parts per million. It was 3 times higher, what the soil lab said. Okay. The pills, after I did them, it came out to 8 parts per million. Wow. Once again, that is what, 1/3 of what the soil test said. Right. So it was very wrong as well. So the conclusions on the phosphorus are that the soil test from the lab, assuming it is correct, which I have no reason to believe it's not, that all of these home soil test kits don't work for phosphorus. They gave me completely wrong answers.
Those things were all over the place.
Yeah, and it wasn't just wrong in the same direction. It was wildly all over. So potassium. Okay. Let's talk about that. So the soil test results from the lab said that my potassium level is 192, which it said was high. Once again, converting it to parts per million, that's 96 parts per million. Once again, soil probe can't test it. That's fine. The capsule test, it said that I was sufficient. Once again, it gave me deficient, adequate, surplus, sufficient, stuff like that. So it gave me sufficient. So that's about the same. You could say it's about the same. Okay. Now, with the drops, with the drop test, I got, once again, it was a range because you had to compare it to colors. It gave me somewhere between 120 to 240 milligrams per liter because that's what the samples, those were the samples I could compare against. So that's somewhere between 74 and 148 parts per million. So once again, it's in the range. It's in the range. And it tended to be a little closer to the 120, which means it was a little lower. So we're close.
It's close.
So the pills, that was really interesting to do. So what you did is you put it in, you crushed this pill in the water, and it formed a precipitate. In other words, it formed really little pieces of solid in there, and you had to judge the color of the solid versus the charts that you had.
My goodness.
And so it was kind of hard. It came out I think,
You think?
once again, it was hard to read, to about 80 parts per million.
Okay.
So it was a little low.
That's a lot.
So you have, overall pH is in the ballpark. Phosphorus was way out.
Yeah.
Potassium is kind of close.
Okay.
Those, I'd say, are probably my overall conclusions. So don't know if it would be useful to go and buy these to try and get actual accurate readings off of.
Right.
Now that I have them, will I continue to use them? Yes.
Yeah,
I
so
will.
that's going to be my question.
Yeah.
Would you use them? Okay.
I'll continue to use what I have. I probably wouldn't buy more.
Right.
And so, especially the pH probe, I really like the idea of being able to just go out, stick it in the ground somewhere, and get a pH reading pretty quick.
Right. But it's just the pH reading.
It's just pH.
it's not
That's what it
phosphorus?
does.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Fantastic.
For the phosphorus, I won't use it because it's obviously not right. Potassium, if I need to do a quick test and I don't want to spend the time and the money to send it off to a soil lab, I might use one of those. Yeah. pH was pretty accurate in all of them. So for the lab tests, obviously are going to be your best bet.
Yes.
They're going to be the most accurate. We use UT Extension Soil Lab that's in Nashville. So we just had to take and fill this box up and mail it off to Nashville. Now there are a lot of states that have soil labs as part of their extension. And so we have created a list on our website where we have links to all of the sites for all the different states that do have that. And so you can go there and see if your state has a soil test lab and use it if you want.
And you find out that many of the states actually do have a
Yes,
soil lab?
many states do. The prices range from free in Arkansas. If you're an Arkansas resident getting a test, it's free.
It's good.
All the way up to about $35
Okay, not bad.
for a test. Now, on top of that though, you also have to pay postage.
Yes.
Because you do have to mail this, and it cost me about $10 to mail this to Nashville. Okay. So just as something to consider in there.
Okay. And you had just the one box?
I just had the one box.
Just one box.
Just the one box. Now, if your state doesn't have an extension lab, or if you need faster results, most cities of substantial size have a private lab that will do soil tests. You'd have to Google it to find out where they are, how much they charge. I can't tell you that, but you don't have to pay postage because you can just drop it off at the lab.
Yeah.
Also, they often have about a one-day turnaround on those test results. With the extension lab, it's about a week or so after you send it off. Then you can also, though, get lab-based soil test kits online, and you can buy them. There's several of them available where they send you the kit, you put soil in the container, and you mail it off to the lab, and they send you results. The cool thing about that is that many of those labs, the cost of shipping it is included in the cost of the test. So you don't have to pay for it.
That's good.
And from what I was able to see, those are anywhere from $25 to $35 for those. Now, one of the huge advantages of soil lab tests in general that you will not get in home test kits is that you get some micronutrient analysis. And so on our UT extension, we got calcium, magnesium, zinc, iron, manganese, boron, and sodium tests as well. And we could have ordered additional if we'd wanted to. We were just going for the basic here. And so the lab tests will give you some of those micronutrients, which can affect plant health as much as your macronutrients can.
Without a doubt.
Also, a lot of the labs, both the extension labs and some of the private labs and the mail-in labs, also give you recommendations.
I think that is so important.
So they say, well, if you want to grow this, you tell them what you're looking to grow, then you should add this much fertilizer at this time of year. And so, for the UT extension one, we have 3 pages of recommendations.
So, and they offer crop codes, so they know specifically what it is that you're trying to grow, and you get your recommendations accordingly.
So in my case here, this is from my yard at home. I asked for warm season turf grass because that's what most of it is. I also did blueberries, apples and pears, and brambles. So for my blackberries. So I could get some recommendations so I can treat those individual areas where those are. So
and all those recommendations pretty clear for you to understand as a homeowner?
And so the lab test gives you that. You don't get that with the home tests. But the home tests can give you some quick results, assuming that they are accurate.
Assuming that they're accurate. Peter, thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
Pretty fun. It's just good.
It was fun to do it.
Yeah, and learned a lot as well, so thank you much. Appreciate that.
The garden has been in the ground for several years. We're seeing some nutrient deficiencies in the plants. So it's time to take a soil sample and to find out what's going on in the soil. To do that, you can use something like this, a soil probe, which you simply stick in the ground and it gives you soil here, and you can take it and put it in the bucket. Or you can take this trowel, like most people have, and you can dig in the ground. The best place to get the soil sample is about 6 inches down. So we'll dig in here and get a small sample in this area. And when you soil sample, you go to different places in your garden and put it in the bucket. Now we've got all of our samples, and we're going to get out all of the organic matter because we don't need that in the soil sample. And then we mix all of these samples together. Mostly you need about 1 cup of soil. So we'll let this dry and mix it up again, and then we'll send it off to our local soil lab to find the analysis of what we need.
All right, here's our Q&A segment. Y'all ready?
Yeah.
All right, these are some great questions. All right, here's our first viewer email. I have 2 maple trees and I want to trim off the bottom branches. Can I do this, and when? And this is Robert from Pensacola, Florida. So can he do this?
Yeah,
Joseph?
yeah, definitely. He
Okay.
can definitely do that. It's a very good picture. And I see he's got some lower branches, some suckers on there. He can definitely cut those back.
Right.
And looking kind of at the size, he may be able to take off some of those lower branches there, just 1 or 2 of those.
Yeah, I wondered
just to
about
kind
that
of lift it up.
Yeah.
You know, you never want to remove more than 1/3 of the canopy at a time. And of course, now is a great time to do that, the February, March time frame,
Right.
before it starts shooting out new growth. And it's, you know, wintertime, him being down in Florida, you don't have to worry too much about the cold, but, you know, make sure you don't do it in freezing temperatures, because
Right.
it can damage those cells and kind of go into the new growth.
That's a good point.
So you may not have to worry too much about that.
Yeah, might not have to. Yeah, good clean cuts. You definitely
Good
want,
clean
yeah, for
cuts.
sure.
Always clean your pruners
Yeah.
between cuts. Use a good alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
and you can get in there and use that, or Lysol spray. So I typically use that. Just
Yeah.
spray it real good and
Yeah, it's probably more convenient.
wipe it down. Yeah.
All right, that's good. Anything you want to add to that, Peter?
No, yeah,
Yeah.
you just, it's limbing up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Line it up and
And,
yeah,
and as you cut the bottom branches, it'll grow taller. And,
Yeah.
you know, so if you want to, every year you can go in and take a couple out and just raise the bottom of it if you want.
I think it'd be nice. Yeah, it's a good picture. Yeah, so
it
we
is.
appreciate that, Robert. Thank you so much for that question. All right, here's our next viewer email. If I could buy a potato from the store and plant it in my garden, will it produce more potatoes? I like that question. This is Kim in Steele, South Carolina. All right, Miss Kim, we're going to hear from Peter on this, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think about that, Peter?
So can you?
Can you?
Yes, but. So store-bought potatoes have a couple of problems. First one is that they're often treated with a chemical that keeps the eyes from sprouting. That way they last longer on the store shelves and don't start growing in the grocery store.
Retardant is what that's called. Yep.
Yeah, and so you may have a hard time getting your potato to sprout.
That's right.
So that's one thing.
That's one thing.
If you can get it to sprout, it will probably grow.
Right.
But that brings in the second one, and that is that we highly recommend that you buy seed potatoes because seed potatoes have been tested to not have disease.
There you go.
And so they are certified as disease-free. And that you're not, every time you put a potato from the store in the ground, you're not going to get this disease. But every once in a while you
Every
might.
once in a while,
And the
right.
problem is that these diseases stay in the soil for years and make it so you cannot grow potatoes in that area for possibly decades. And so if you're willing to risk that, you could do it. But I'd recommend seed potatoes. They also are usually a better size for
Okay, yeah.
planting. They tend to be
I think about
smaller,
that,
whereas you know in the grocery store they're trying to give you the biggest potato
Right,
you
right,
can get.
right.
But the two diseases that really kill you with potatoes are Phytophthora, you know, that's a root rot, and then potato scab. Now you think, well, they grow potatoes year after year after year in like Idaho, and they do, but they go through, and they actually they treat the soil with chemicals that as homeowners we can't get.
Right.
And so they can do that. We can't.
Yeah.
So yes, I would recommend seed potatoes if you can get them.
If you can get them, I would recommend that. Yeah, but it's always nice to experiment. You just want to experiment just to see if it works. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good, Peter. Have you done this before?
Yes.
Yeah, I figured he has. So what was your success rate? I mean, did they actually sprout? Did you?
So actually in the square foot garden a couple years ago, since we are planting potatoes in the fall, it's hard to find seed potatoes in the fall.
Right, okay.
And
That's
so
good.
we ended up having to go to the grocery store
Right.
and get potatoes from there.
Yeah.
And they sprouted and they eyed and they grew for a while and then they did not produce, they died. I don't think it had anything to do with the
Okay.
potato. Yeah,
Okay.
I think it was environmental conditions.
Okay. Yeah, but you tried.
Something else is if you do want to use those potatoes, you might want to, the store-bought potatoes, you might want to try growing them in a raised bed or a barrel or something like that.
Okay.
That way, if you do have a problem, you can just dig all the soil out, throw it out in the woods,
There you go.
fill it with new soil, and go again. Yeah.
Good point. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So there you have it, Ms. Kim. It's been tried. It's been tried. All right. But thank you for the question. It's a good question. All right, Peter, Joseph, that was fun. That was fun. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is questions@familyplotgarden.com. And the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee, 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. If you want to get more information about soil testing or anything else we talked about today, go to familyplotgarden.com. We have lots of information to help you in your garden this year. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.